All right, let's dive into Malorie Blackman's Noughts and Crosses. We've got some excerpts from an overview to guide us. And yeah, this one's going to be a real think piece, I think. It throws us into this world, right, where the whole racial power dynamic is totally flipped. Like, imagine black people, they called crosses here, they hold all the power, and white people, the knots, are the ones facing oppression. Whoa!
It's a huge concept, really makes you question everything you thought you knew. And Blackman, she doesn't just like swap the label, she builds this whole alternate history, you know,
Yeah.
where everything, the politics, the culture, even just like daily life is shaped by this reverse dynamic. It's really immersive.
Super immersive. I'm curious, how do you see her using this alternate reality to like expose those deeper layers of prejudice? It's like she's getting under the skin of racism, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant. By flipping the script, she makes readers confront racism from a completely new angle. It's not just about individual acts of hate anymore, you know. It's about how power works systemically.
Yeah.
Who controls the narrative, who makes the rules, and how that impacts everything from education and jobs to how people are treated by like law enforcement. You're suddenly forced to see the world through the eyes of the marginalized group. And well, that can be a very uncomfortable experience,
Well,
but necessary.
absolutely necessary. And to make it even more impactful, she draws from real world events too, right?
Yes, the book is very much informed by the murder of Stephen Lawrence, a black teenager in London, and how the investigation was mishandled. It really shows how art can be born from pain and a need to process these complex issues.
Wow. That adds another layer of depth to the story. It's not just fictional, it's grounded in real struggles people face because of their race.
Exactly. And it reminds us that these issues aren't just history, they're still happening, and we need to pay attention.
So true. Okay, let's get into the heart of the story. We've got Sephy, a cross from a powerful family, and Callum, a knot, facing the harsh realities of being on, well, the wrong side of this power dynamic. I can already see the star-crossed lovers thing coming into play, but it feels, I don't know, bigger than that.
It is. It's not just families feuding, it's a whole society split by race. And Blackman uses this forbidden love story to explore so much more than just romance. It's a way to look at prejudice, injustice, and how hard it is to navigate relationships when the world is trying to tear you apart.
And speaking of complexity, Malorie Blackman herself, she's written over 70 books and even received an OBE, that's like an Officer of the Order of the British Empire from the Queen. That's incredible.
It is. It shows just how powerful her work is and how it impacts people. Noughts and Crosses, it's even been adapted for TV, which shows how much it resonates. And Blackman, she doesn't hold back. For example, knots in this world, they're called blankers, a really derogatory term, you know. It really highlights the dehumanizing language used to justify oppression.
That unflinching look at inequality, it pulls you in. You mentioned Sephy and Callum earlier. Could you tell us more about their individual stories?
Well, Sephy, she's portrayed as kind and brave,
Yeah.
but also very privileged because of her family's status. And Callum, he's smart, determined, but he's constantly hitting these walls because he's a knot. It's really sad to see how his potential is stifled by society.
It makes you think, how will their completely different experiences shape them and their relationship?
And that's where it gets interesting. They both struggle with their families, but in different ways. Sephy's parents, they're high profile, but their marriage is strained, and her mom struggles with sadness and alcohol dependency. Callum's family, on the other hand, they face financial hardship and the constant threat of prejudice.
So even within their families, they're dealing with a lot. I'm seeing how Blackman weaves these layers together, showing the personal and the political all at once.
Right, and then there's another layer. Callum's sister, Lynette, she's experienced something traumatic, which has impacted her mental health. It reminds us that the personal and the political are always connected, and trauma can manifest in so many ways.
It seems like Blackman wants us to really think about how people navigate their identities and relationships within a system designed to keep them apart.
Exactly. She raises the question, how do you break free from these constraints and forge your own path when everything is pushing you in a specific direction? That's what she explores.
It's like she's asking us to look at those invisible barriers in our own world, those subtle things that shape our lives.
Absolutely. And she does this in a powerful way by throwing Callum into a situation that disrupts everything. He becomes one of the first knots to attend Heathcroft, this elite school usually just for crosses. Can you imagine?
Oh, the tension. It's like she's creating this pressure cooker to see how the characters and their prejudices will react. What happens to Callum when he enters this elite world?
It's a turning point, a moment that challenges everything. Callum, being at Heathcroft, exposes the ugliness beneath the surface of this supposedly civilized society.
It's like she's holding a mirror up to our systems, showing the cracks and injustices we often don't see.
You got it. And Callum? He becomes a target, facing bullying and discrimination from his classmates, even some teachers. It's heartbreaking, but sadly realistic, considering the history of segregation and resistance to change.
It makes you wonder about the role of education in a society like this. Is it a tool for equality or just another way to maintain the power structure?
That's exactly the question Blackman wants us to grapple with. It's the uncomfortable truth that education, even though it's supposed to be this great equalizer, can also exclude people and perpetuate inequality when things aren't fair.
So we have all this tension, and then boom, the Dundale bombing happens, a terrorist attack on a shopping center mostly frequented by crosses. I can't even imagine the impact of that.
It's a turning point, a moment where fear and violence explode, making things even worse. It shows the danger of extremism and how easily people can turn to violence when they feel unheard.
And then, to make matters worse, Callum's father and brother are accused of being involved, even though they're innocent. It makes you think about racial profiling and prejudice all over again.
Absolutely. It shows how quickly assumptions and biases can lead to wrongful accusations and injustice. In this moment of crisis, Callum's father makes a huge sacrifice. Even though he's innocent, he confesses to protect his son. He takes a death sentence for him.
Oh, that's just awful. It shows the depth of his love, but it also shows how broken the system is, how quick it is to condemn those who are already marginalized.
It's devastating. And it changes Callum. He joins the Liberation Militia, a group fighting for not rights, even if it means resorting to violence. He's grieving, angry, and wants justice. But his path is dangerous.
This is where things get morally complicated, right? We can understand his pain, but joining a militant group raises questions.
Exactly. Blackman doesn't give simple answers. We might understand why he wants change, but his choice brings up complicated questions about whether violence can ever be justified, even in the fight for equality.
That gray area makes the story so interesting. It's not just good versus evil, it's about flawed people making tough choices in a flawed system. And all of this is happening while Sephy and Callum are falling in love.
It's like Romeo and Juliet, but with racial tension and systemic inequality added in. It makes their story even more powerful and challenging. They're trying to find each other amidst this storm of pressure, family drama, and political chaos. It's captivating.
It sounds like Blackman has created this amazing story that's both personal and political. It makes me think about how prejudice and inequality work in our world, even if they're not as obvious as in Noughts and Crosses.
That's what's so great about speculative fiction. It lets us look at these issues from a different perspective and maybe understand our own reality better.
This has been a fantastic start to our deep dive. Anything standing out to you so far?
You know, what's really fascinating to me is how Blackman manages to explore these heavy, complex themes while still making a story that's so engaging. It's not just a lecture. It pulls you in and keeps you hooked.
Absolutely. It shows how talented she is as a writer. She makes us think deeply about these issues without losing the emotional impact.
And she doesn't give easy answers. She shows a world where both sides have their own struggles and viewpoints. It's not about making one group the villain and the other the hero. It's about understanding the system that creates the inequality.
She's challenging us to think critically and to see the nuances, not just go for simple solutions.
Exactly. And that's what makes Noughts and Crosses so powerful and relevant today.
I'm ready for more. Let's dig into some key events and themes in the next part of our deep dive.
You know, thinking about Callum, it's really striking how his story forces us to look at the realities of activism and the moral dilemmas that come with it.
It's like he's trapped. He wants justice, but the path he's chosen is so risky and ethically complex. Does the book give us any insight into how he's dealing with that internal struggle?
Oh, Blackman does a fantastic job of showing Callum's inner conflict. Grief, anger, that burning need for change, it's all there. But he's also questioning the Liberation Militia's methods, you know?
Yeah.
Like, is violence ever the right answer, even in the fight for equality? That's a question that hits hard, makes you think about your own beliefs about activism.
Right, and it's even more complicated because of his feelings for Sephy. Different worlds, opposite sides of this whole conflict, and yet they're drawn to each other. It's almost like their love is this tiny spark of hope in all the darkness.
Their relationship is really powerful. It shows how humans can connect and empathize, even when everything is trying to keep them apart. Like, no matter how tough things get, Love and friendship can be that lifeline.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if their love can actually bridge the gap between those two worlds, or will it get crushed by all the pressure and prejudice?
That's the big question, the tension that drives the whole story. Their love is constantly being tested, pushing them to face their own biases and fight for a future where they can just be together.
So we have this forbidden love, the exploration of activism, and then this overarching theme of prejudice that seems to be everywhere. What other kinds of prejudice does Blackman explore?
One of the things I love about this book is that prejudice isn't just about race. She shows it in so many different ways, reminding us that it can pop up anywhere.
Can you give some examples? I'm curious to see how these different types of prejudice connect and play out.
Sure. Like Sephy, even she faces prejudice from her own community because of her mother's mental health struggles.
Hmm.
There's this stigma, even among the Crosses, and she feels it.
It's like prejudice is this monster with many heads ready to show up anywhere. It's not just about what you look like, it's about these deep-seated beliefs and societal norms.
You said it. And Blackman also touches on classism, the economic
Mm.
differences between groups, both within the Crosses and the Noughts.
It's a reminder that inequality works on multiple levels, and those different forms of prejudice often feed into each other. So we have this whole web of social issues, but amidst all the darkness, is there any hope?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most powerful messages is about family. No matter what they go through, both Sephy and Callum find strength and support from their families.
It really shows how family can be that anchor, a source of unconditional love, even when the world feels like it's falling apart.
It reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles. We can find strength in those who love us, even if those relationships are messy sometimes.
It sounds like Black Man is showing a very human side to all of this, acknowledging the bad and the good.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, the prejudice, the violence, the struggles,
Yeah.
but she also shows the power of love, empathy, and family ties. It gives you hope.
It's that balance that makes the story so good. It's not a fairy tale, it's real, it's human, with all the flaws and contradictions.
And I think that's why Noughts and Crosses still resonates with people today. It speaks to universal truth about love, loss, and the fight for equality. It stays with you.
I'm starting to feel like this book isn't just a story, it's a call to action. Do you feel that too?
Oh, definitely. I think Blackman is pushing us to look at our own biases and think about how we can make the world a fairer place.
Like she's saying, don't just sit there, do something, challenge the way things are, fight for what's right.
Exactly. And she reminds us that change starts with each of us, challenging our own prejudices and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard.
It's like she's inspiring us to be part of the change, to use our voices and actions to create a better world, one where love and understanding win.
That's a message everyone needs to hear, no matter who they are or what they believe.
Before we move on, any other key themes or insights we should mention?
One thing that really stayed with me is the idea that even when things seem hopeless, there's always some light, some connection, some resilience that shines through.
It's like a reminder to never give up hope, even when things are dark. There's always something worth fighting for, something to believe in.
And that's a powerful message to leave with our listeners. Noughts and Crosses might be fictional, but its themes and messages are so relevant to our lives and what we're facing today.
It's a book that makes us think about our own biases, challenge the way things are, and strive for a future where love and equality win.
And if anyone wants to explore these themes further, the overview recommends The Slated Trilogy by Terry or The House of Light by Julia Green. Both deal with similar ideas of societal control, rebellion, and finding your identity.
Great suggestions. But before you run off to the bookstore, let's take a minute to really think about Noughts and Crosses. What's resonating with you? What are you thinking about as we head into the last part of our deep dive?
For me, it's Blackman's refusal to give us easy answers. It's like you want to look at this world and be like, okay, this side is good, that side's bad. But she doesn't let you do that. No, not at all. It's so much more, complicated. She makes you see that even in groups fighting for what's right, there can be disagreements and morally gray areas. It makes you think, what would I do?
Right. It shows the power of this kind of story, dystopian fiction. It's like a safe place to think about these big issues, social and political stuff, to try out different scenarios and really wrestle with the hard questions.
Yeah, like a thought experiment, but on a huge scale. What if things were totally different? How would we react? Would we change? By, thinking about these what ifs, we might actually understand ourselves better, our own values and beliefs and biases even.
I like that exploring a made-up world helps us figure out the real one. And maybe, just maybe, it pushes us to, I don't know, challenge the bad stuff we see and try to make things fairer.
That's what art can do, right? It takes us somewhere else, makes us think, and hopefully it makes us better, more caring people. And I think Noughts and Crosses does that really well.
Totally agree. I'm ready to read this book now, but before we wrap up, I have one last question
Yeah.
for you and for anyone listening.
Okay, shoot.
Imagine stepping into this world, noughts and crosses. You can be a cross or a knot. Which do you choose? And how do you live in this world? What choices do you make? What do you fight for?
Wow, that's a big one. It makes you think about what you truly believe in. How would we act if the power was so different? There's no easy answer, and that's what makes this story so powerful, so relevant to us, even now.
It's that open ending that sticks with you. It's not just about getting lost in a story, it's about what you bring back with you.
And I really hope our listeners will do that. Take those questions and insights from Noughts and Crosses and use them, engage with their own communities and try to make things better.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Noughts and Crosses, it's not just a story, it's a mirror, showing us how complex our own world is and challenging us to make it more just, more equal. So, until our next deep dive, keep thinking, keep your hearts open, and happy reading.